let's put a score on that album. Zac Brown Band, Jekyll Hyde. It's review time, and it's time for me to cover my first ever country record. I've found favor with Zac Brown Band over the years. Of course, they have their silly singles like Chicken Fried, which are still a hell of a lot of fun, all the way to Highway 20 Ride, and more recently some of their stuff off of Uncaged, and of course, what I really started getting into them because of the Grohl Sessions Volume 1, of course recorded with the legendary Dave Grohl himself, dropped in 2013. Definitely a fan of that project. Saw them unleashing a little bit more. Of course, Uncaged let out some more of their jam band tendencies, some more of those southern rock influences, and of course, you get Dave Grohl involved, and it's just a good time all around. I've never listened to a ton of their stuff, but at the same time, like I said, I've enjoyed some of their singles. Some of them have hooked me, and I've been listening to them pretty consistently throughout the years since they debuted really into the mainstream in 2008. Jekyll Hyde is their fourth proper studio album, following up Uncaged, which just to me proved that they were more than just a string of hit songs at country radio. You guys probably know how I feel about mainstream country music this day and age, and if you don't, well then here you go. I fucking hate it. Jason Aldean, Luke Bryan, Toby Keith in his modern state at least, are all complete bullshit to me. Dirt roads, drinking beer, objectifying women in bikinis. It's just the same rehashed shit over and over again. And when I really started respecting Zac Brown, the leader of this group, he called Luke Bryan on his shit. He's like, hey, even though Luke is one of my pals, his new song that he put out, That's My Kind of Night, off of his most recent album, I believe in 2013, he was like, it's the worst song I've ever heard. And I'm just over here like, slow clap for you, Zac Brown, slow clap. I know these guys don't write their own songs, but come on, I grew up on country music. Some of the good stuff too. I'm talking all the way back to Hank Williams, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, and even the pop country of the mid-2000s, the mid to early 2000s. Some of Toby Keith, Martina McBride, Tim McGraw, George Strait even. They had a lot of good and consistent music that was about more than that. They actually had topics that I was interested in. I'm from the South, and while I don't, of course, identify as a redneck and don't really care for that sort of lifestyle, I like the songs that associate kind of good values and maybe just having a good time, and of course Homegrown off of this new record, Jekyll Hyde, is one of those songs that falls in line with those tendencies. It might not be the most aggressive single, it may feel a little bit safe to the casual listener, but at the same time, I can't help but enjoy it because it reminds me so much of my childhood. It reminds me of my dad, my grandpa, sitting around just relaxing, having a cup of lemonade and talking about stuff, talking about old stories and that sort of thing. And Homegrown reminds me of that. It talks about having what you need and not just living in excess, not having anything that you don't need. And I feel like in a world full of luxuries where rappers and other country stars brag and that sort of thing, this is just a band that is down to earth and actually talk about real life things. And that's heard once again on the track that I feel like is probably dedicated to his wife, Loving You Easy. It's definitely one of the more traditional country songs on the record. I like that it's not just like, hey girl, I saw you in the club and you're so hot, or I rolled up on you in my jacked up truck and I was like, hop in, let's go for a ride cause you sexy and I want to get laid tonight. No, this is a man sitting down, talking to his wife and saying, you know what, after all this time, or maybe it could really be anyone in a long-term relationship, after all this time, I still find you amazing and we're doing what we can to continue improving our relationship, but at the same time, I'm still kind of awestruck just by your presence and being around you day to day and kind of helping each other get through life. And I think that that's spectacular. There are other tracks on this LP that do similar things for me, but kind of fall more into that pop country territory that I know a lot of people kind of hate to use that term, but country pop does exist. I mean, Taylor Swift lived off of it for half of her career. The band is really just living up to this album's name big time on the record. Jekyll Hyde, of course, the Robert Louis Stevenson novel from the 1800s. Very, very famous novel. If you have not read it, you probably know the synopsis of the story. It's basically a man, I believe, drinks a potion and he's one man at night and he's a different man by day. And even by this album's cover, you can kind of see the different looks in his eyes. And I think that that's referring to the different types of music that they're playing here on this record. There's so many different genres covered here. There's different sides of the spectrum. I'm hearing everything from that country pop that I was just talking about to tracks like Remedy, and then even that opening track, which I felt went really, really poppy, Beautiful Drug, but at the same time, I think that it wasn't distasteful. They pulled it off because it just has kind of a foot-stomping vibe about it that really makes me get into it. They've got that. Then, of course, you've got your almost pop reggae-leaning tracks that come up here in the middle of this record. That one is called Castaway, and that's a very fun track that we're going to talk about later. And then you've got a jazzy tune with Sarah Bareilles, the pop star, called Mango Tree, and even a hard-rocking post-grunge-leaning track with Chris Cornell of Soundgarden fame, Heavy is the Head. These guys are going all over the place, and they are somehow tying it all together and making it work. It's like the bottom of a pool. It's got that liner in there. It's country music. That's the liner for this record. It's there. There's a little bit of twang and southern flair in pretty much all of these songs, and I think that that kind of keeps it from falling apart at the seams. And not to say that this album is kind of falling apart and all over the place, it's just that country is lining it, and from there they can branch out and go in all these different directions. Like I said, there are those country pop ones, Beautiful Drug, Wildfire, Remedy. Remedy has a soaring chorus on it and has a very solid message to it as well. Zac Brown definitely is a man of faith. I think he makes that quite apparent here on this track. This song preaches a state of contentment that he has found from top to bottom. It's all over the song, and I think that it's a nice force. And of course, the gospel choir that's thrown on this track just sounds absolutely fantastic. It adds an extra soulful feel to the cut. The album really starts to impress me when it gets more experimental. Who the hell would have known that they could pull off a hard rock and a jazz track back to back with guest vocalists from totally different sides of the spectrum. You've got Sarah Bareilles, like I mentioned, and then Chris Cornell. Back-to-back tracks, but I love them both, and they're both near the top for me in terms of my favorites. Mango Tree is that track that features Bareilles on the track, and it gets jazzier than you really would have ever expected Zac Brown Band to get. Brown gets downright joyful with his vocal approach here on this track and does a fan-damn-tastic job of just selling it and making it sound like something that would appear on a 50s movie soundtrack. Bareilles would have to be the weaker part of the track for me. I don't think her vocals kind of stood out to me. They didn't really present themselves as something that I could really sink my teeth into, but at the same time, I like that they feed off of each other's energy, kind of go back and forth with a few of their lines. So overall, still a really, really solid tune. For the second surprise, we get the menacing rocker featuring Chris Cornell of Soundgarden fame, Heavy is the Head. All these years later, and Cornell's voice still sounds just as uncompromising and relentless and mysterious as it did back in the 90s. Brown and Cornell trade their parts off in the song, both feeling pretty much equally strong to me. The main thing that you cannot ignore here is how compelling this instrumental is. The guitars come to life, the drums get furious, and you cannot ignore that solo either. I wouldn't mind catching these guys live someday. I really could see them adding in some extra jam parts that could go on in this track, and I think it would sound perfect. I really like how they cut loose on the 7-minute track Junkyard, which, yes, it is a longer tune, but at the same time, they totally justify that runtime. While the latter fourth of this record did lose traction in my eyes, it's tracks like these that make it all so worthwhile. Once again, changing directions, we have Bittersweet, which opens up with a violin and has some lyrics that really just hit me right in the feels. Definitely a contender for my favorite track here on this record. It really just has a style that reminds me a lot of my time living at the beach, maybe that tropical breeze kind of blowing in and breathing life into this cut. The latter half of this track really just channels a southern rock feel and sees the guitars and drums totally coming to life here on this one, and just sees Brown kind of letting go of some memories, letting them float off into the night. Castaway takes the spirited side of those tropical vibes that are going on and still keeps it kind of beachy, but at the same time it opts for more of a lighthearted and laid-back tone. It makes you feel like maybe you're on a shore somewhere. I could see this being a big hit at not only like bars or something like that, but maybe being played live or at a karaoke party. I think Spectrum Pulse and I are actually hosting one of those sometime within the next year. Make sure to tweet them for details on that. Wasn't that into the latter fourth of the record, honestly. There were tracks that did hit home for me, but at the same time, cuts like Dress Blues kind of ran on fumes throughout its 5-minute run, and the songs Wildfire and Young and Wild essentially being stuff that I've heard so many times that I can't even remotely care about it. The final track that I'm going to talk about, though, is one that I'm the most on the fence with, and it's called Tomorrow Never Comes. I know there is an acoustic version that kind of closes out this record, but I'm talking about the regular version here. I think I saved it for last just because I have the most complicated feelings on this one. It definitely dabbles in several different genres here, and it's really hard for me to pin down what I do and don't like about it. It's easy to sing along with, but at the same time, I feel like the synths and the guitars kind of clash, especially during the chorus of the track. It's slightly off-putting, but at the same time, I have to admit that I find myself coming back to it. Not just the whole album, but really just that one song I could see myself coming back to in the future, just because it's different, it's interesting, and it does play with some pop sensibilities. Those synthesizers on the track do get a little bit grating, I guess, to me. I feel like some country fans definitely won't be a fan of it, but at the same time, hey, it's not burning it down Jason Aldean drum machine bad, is it? Too soon? Zac Brown Band caught me off guard with this one, guys. I did not go into Jekyll Hyde expecting to like it as much as I am. I'm definitely pleasantly surprised. Bet you never thought you'd see the day that ARTV covered a country record, now did you? Well, I reckon that day's here now, ain't it, my friends? Jekyll Hyde gets a 4 out of me and a promise that I will probably never do that country accent again. Definitely check it out for yourself and let me know what you thought in the comments section. So is Jekyll Hyde their best record yet? Or is it maybe their worst or somewhere in the middle? How are you guys feeling about it? And what do you think about Zac Brown Band in general? Let me know in the comment section down below, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel while you're down there, because friends don't let friends go unsubscribed. If you're interested in helping support this channel, sign up for a 14-day free trial with a music streaming service called Rhapsody. You can help me out and help yourself out by getting a lot of free streaming music on that site for 14 days. So check that out. It's the top link in the description down below, I believe, and check me out on Twitter and Facebook as well. Thanks for watching. If there are any other albums you'd like to see me cover, let me know about them in the comments section down below, and bear with me. During this busy time that I'm going through right now, I'll try to have another review up very, very soon. Thanks for watching ARTV.